everyone, and welcome to this episode of When Push Comes to Shove. Today I'm accompanied by Alison. She's an independent midwife. And Alison, so just tell us everything about yourself, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so hi Nickita. So I am an independent midwife and a lactation consultant, and I've been doing that since about 1997, so quite a long time, although I haven't spent all those years working as a midwife within the NHS. I suppose my journey began as a student midwife, and much of what I saw as a student midwife, I thought, this is a bit barbaric, and actually it didn't really sit very well with me, some of the things that I witnessed as a student midwife, and it was a real struggle to get through that training. And then I worked for a couple of years as a midwife, and where I worked at the time, it was very much it was like the old domino service. So you would basically, you'd see all your own clients. The women had mostly births with us. We would do their 41-week checks, and then they would be sent to the doctor. So invariably, they didn't really see a doctor unless there was an emergency or we were really concerned. Most of them were just seen by midwives, and then we carried a pager, and we would just be called to those births, whether we were in hospital or whether we were at home. And it worked really, really well, because we really got to know the clients and really good rapport. We didn't do the community care, that then got passed on to other people. So I felt that I had a really good introduction, even though some parts of it I felt were a bit barbaric. It was a really good introduction to how midwifery ought to be, really. And the majority of women had vaginal births without any intervention. And of course, that's changed over time. Then I had my own babies, and so I was very geared up for having home births. With the first one, because I knew, obviously, I'd worked as a student midwife and as a midwife for a few years after that. There were some things that I knew I really didn't want, and I was 43 weeks and really not wanting to be induced. So there was quite a lot of pressure from other healthcare professionals that I was being irresponsible, that it was a stupid idea and various things. But I really felt instinctively that perhaps she wasn't ready, and I didn't feel worried at all. And I kept being told, well, there's a 50% chance that your baby will die, and they were putting all these statistics about what might happen. But I still felt like, well, she's not ready yet. But obviously I knew I was getting beyond I'd gone beyond the 42 weeks. I said that I would go in for daily checks. So I was going in for daily checks. I was happy to do that because I wanted to know that she was all right as well. But every time I went, it was really difficult, because I go to the maternity unit and the maternity day unit, and they'd say things like, you could hear them whispering up the corridor going, there you go, look, she's the one, and she's a midwife. Can you believe that she's refusing to be induced and she's a midwife? So then I went to her and I had some acupuncture, and then I went into spontaneous labour, and I laboured for probably about 30 hours at home. And I was in second stage for quite a long time. So I didn't really have any examinations, because I didn't want examinations. And the midwives were part of a home birth service. So they were really supportive of my wishes. And I just potted around, I just moved about. I got into the pool, but then what I found in the pool is that I had this terrible pain deep in my legs that I couldn't actually stay in the pool. So I moved around a bit more, and then I really wasn't in a midwife mode at all. I was really kind of going with my body and really trusting what was going on. We don't know exactly, because I wasn't examined, but I suspect I was probably, even though I wasn't pushing for all of that time, I was probably in second stage for about 7 hours. And a lot of that time I had been pushing. But the baby seemed to be still in good condition, and I was quite content. I was pulling off doors, I was changing position, I was getting into all sorts of lifting my legs up on the bed to try and open the space up. And then it came a point where I thought, I don't think this is happening. And the midwives probably were already thinking it, but they didn't really put pressure on. They really trusted that I was really going with what I was feeling. And then we went to hospital, because it was obvious then that, I'd been pushing for quite a long time, and it was time to go in. So I went in, and I knew in my head, because I'd witnessed obviously lots of women in hospital, I was absolutely certain that I did not want an epidural. I didn't really consider a spinal at the time, and I really wanted, if I was going in to have a cesarean, that I wanted to have it under general anaesthetic. So when we went in, they examined me, and I was fully dilated, And they said, we'll give you half an hour of the Syntocinon, and then we'll probably do a ventouse or forceps. At which point I knew, because I'm a midwife and I know what happens, I didn't want to have that, because I know that many babies can get distressed. And all up until this point, my baby had been absolutely fine. So I chose not to have Syntocinon and decided to go for a cesarean. So I felt really empowered. They really tried to talk me out of going under general anaesthetic. And probably looking back, I might have chosen a spinal rather than a anaesthetic, but I felt really strongly, and it was just what, anyway, it was a decision I'd made, but they weren't very happy about the decision I'd made. They really tried to convince me to have an epidural and Syntocinon, but I said no, I really.
For those of you who don't know, Syntocinon is a synthetic form of oxytocin, which causes contractions in labour, which often, as Alison knows, ends in fetal distress. So we just have to.
So yeah, so thank you. So anyway, so I ended up going to theatre. It was quite embarrassing, really, because I was adamant that I was, you know, still pushing, and I had a very, very strong urge to push. And as I was being wheeled to theatre, I wasn't being a very well-behaved patient, saying, treat me like a woman, please don't treat me like a piece of meat, because I won't be aware of what's going on. Please. I mean, I think in the end, they were only too glad to get to get the anaesthetic into me, to put me out. Yeah, because I was very clear about what I wanted. And that was all okay. And there was a little bit of separation, obviously, you know, with the baby, but, you know, she was with me as soon as was possible. But we did have lots of feeding issues, and really that led me to my life's work of supporting mothers with breastfeeding, because of the challenges that I had with my first. But I never felt traumatized about having the cesarean, because I really felt like I'd done everything I could. And even though I went against medical advice more than once, I was able to trust my instincts and go with that. So I came out feeling quite empowered. I never felt traumatized by it, because I felt like I had been in charge of all the things, even though they were saying, you can't possibly have it under a general anaesthetic. It's like, but that's what I want. That's what's going to work for me now.
Yeah, it's an informed decision. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think it's important to say that, you know, you can have, you know, make these informed decisions about how you want to birth, even if it's not quite how I planned it.
Yeah.
So when the second came along, again, 43 weeks, not gone into labour, so I was fine about it. I thought, okay, well, this must be just how I do things. And by this time, I had asked for a team of midwives to support me, and they were a bit anxious to start with, but I just said, no, you know, I take full responsibility for anything that happens. I'm going to go with my body. And then I think we were just at the 43-week mark, and my waters went overnight, and I decided in the morning, I just thought, I just want to check. Anyway, when I went in, they had said the fluid is really low around the baby. And I know that as a midwife, when there's less fluid around the baby, that it's a sort of early sign that the kidneys might be affected, and that maybe it's time for baby to be born. So I did decide to start an induction. I was anxious about it, but I said, I'm not going to let this go on for hours and hours. But I wanted to, you know, give it my best shot. So we did the Syntocinon drip, like we talked about the last time, and it kind of felt okay. But then there came a point where I was just 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, and just never really got past that. And then I went to. It was me kind of saying, I think we need to go to theatre. No, we don't need to go to theatre now. And
was your baby in? Do you know? I'm just trying to work out why.
I think she was probably posterior.
Yeah.
I didn't have an epidural with this Syntocinon, because I know that, you know, Syntocinon, you know, can make it much more intense than if contractions are your own. Makes it much more intense. But I knew that I wanted to be able to feel everything. I didn't want to disguise it by having an epidural. So you know, and actually it was backbreaking. There were points where I thought, gosh, it feels like my pelvis is going to come open. Anyway, after many hours, it was me saying, right, I think you know, we've had a good old go here, and it just, you know, it just doesn't seem to be happening. So then it was decided that I would go for section, but I was very clear that I did not want to go under a general this time. that I was just having a spinal. Then they tried to convince me to have no, just have an epidural. I was like, no, just give me a spinal, nice and quick. Just give me the spinal. And then we went into theatre and she was born. And when the surgeon, who I really respected because I'd worked with her as a midwife before, she said, Alison, she said, if you go on to have a third baby, and of course at that point I was like, no, I don't think so. She said, it's really important that you have a cesarean, she said, because you have got a very tiny pelvis. So basically what I can gather, and it makes really much sense, Nickita, from the history, is they don't really go in. They don't really go into the pelvis. They kind of sit on top, which is why with all that Syntocinon on and with all that 7 hours of pushing with that first baby, they never got distressed. But I think it's because they just don't go in. And obviously it was a bit of a relief, because I thought, gosh, it makes such sense. You know, I'm doing all this hanging off the doors, you know, I'm being upright in labor. I didn't do any lying down. It was all, you know, in the water and out of the water and legs up and legs down. I wasn't lying on my back at all. So it kind of made sense for me, really.
Wow. Okay.
I was able to come to peace with it quite quickly, actually. And I never expected to have a third. And then 9 months later, I discovered I was pregnant with the third. So I thought, well, I could attempt another birth, but because I'd had that information, I then decided that I'd have an elective section, which was the most bizarre experience, to go to hospital to know that you're going to have your baby today. Yeah. Very, very strange indeed. So all quite different experiences, but I felt empowered in all of them because I had made the decisions. And I think as a midwife as well, you know, you can pretty much do anything to women, but if you take their choice and control away, that is what is far worse. That's when women are more likely to be very distressed and upset and possibly even traumatized after birth.
What I've noticed is there's a very key element that is not being discussed in the NHS curriculum, as it were, like in an antenatal environment. Birth physiology is not being explained to women. It takes less than 2 minutes to explain very basic birth physiology. So, you know, you get these questions all the time about home birth. What if something goes wrong? Well, let's explain why it goes right. Let's explain the roles of the hormones during labour. And if women understand what their bodies are doing and they understand normal birth, and also must point out, this should start at school when they're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So by the time they get pregnant, they're not going to be backed into a corner and frightened, and you know. But if you understand very basic birth physiology, I think women will have more power and go, oh, okay, that's how it works. Not just give their birth to someone else. So in your opinion, Alison, why do you think birth has become so medicalised in the last 20 years? I know it has before that, but in the last 20 years, it's got pretty bad.
Yeah, it's definitely got worse. And I think, if I'm honest, Nickita, I think it's to do with fear. It's very fear-based. And I think really, you know, underlying all of it is that healthcare professionals are also scared. We've become so scared in birth, and a lot of healthcare professionals are also scared. They might not say it. And I think what happens is they project their fear onto the women. So they might say things like, well, if you don't have this induction, you know, we can't promise, you know, the condition the baby will come out in, or there seems to be a lot more coercion and bullying than there ever used to be.
Where does that come from? Has birth all of a sudden become dangerous inherently? I don't understand. Is it just become a normal thing? And you know, I know doctors aren't being educated in normal birth. They're there for when things go wrong, not.
Well, I think it is the thing that what I would say is it's really important to know the norm well. And I think that's what's missing. People don't know the norm well. They're being exposed to all of these interventions and think that that's normal. So it's really important to know the normal well. So then it really stands out when things aren't going so well, like in the situation I gave.
For sure. I mean, and you do come into a very, very small category of an unlikely event.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's lots of women that listen to these podcasts and go, oh, wow, yeah, you know, I would definitely go natural if I wasn't high risk. But then when you really examine it, were they high risk? You know, they're being told they're high risk, and it's just a guideline that the NHS have to tick to say, well, yeah, we've told them this, but they're not educating women. They're not giving them informed consent at all. But moving on to the issue with independent midwives, why do you think that the insurance problem is as it is? Where's this modern day witch hunt come from, and why are you guys not being insured on the basis of your practice? Why are you being why is insurance being measured against basic obstetric practice? What's going on?
It's really, I find it very difficult to answer. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It does feel like a bit of a modern day witch hunt, as to why we can't get insurance. You know, we are slightly, I think the thing is that we're giving women choice, like real choice. Like this is the information, these are the risks, these are the things that are positive, and these are the things that are not so positive. You decide. And it seems that I'm not even sure where it comes from, Nickita. It's like whoever they are, the forces that be, whoever they are.
I think the main problem, okay, so usually you're going to fit into a bracket of I'm going to have a standard NHS birth, and if I tick all the boxes, all the guidelines, you'll probably have a decent experience, okay, and come out and thinking that's great. And you'd think, well, what's the point in an independent midwife when I can get this for free? But what that person wouldn't realise is they are not out the realms of guidelines, so therefore everything's going swimmingly. If you, like myself, you know, you're not ticking all the boxes and you need an independent midwife, that's great. But then you have a great experience with an independent midwife and there's no in between. People don't understand that there's a grey area, and this needs to be explored. And now independent midwives have no insurance. You're left with the option of birthing in a COVID-ridden hospital, or, you know, forget COVID, just stepping foot in hospital will just astronomically bounce your chances of intervention. Okay, so you got that. Or if you're confident enough and you are well informed, you can free birth, but there are so many free births happening because they feel coerced into it, because it's Sophie's choice sort of thing. So there's no independent midwife choice anymore. That's disgusting.
Yeah, and I think what people don't realise when you have an independent midwife is, you know, you're even if you have NHS care, it's still being paid for. It just might not be coming out of your pocket. It's still being paid for.
That because a lot of people say, well, it's just for the rich, and no, that don't seem right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it costs about probably costs about the same. Whether you've got an independent midwife or you have it in the NHS. It's just that it's not coming out of the woman's pocket. And the thing that people are buying into with independent care is that they are buying into continuity of care and carer, which very often is not provided by the system. Now, we see a lot of women who are high risk, but also they've experienced maybe a lot of trauma. And so they want a more sensitive, more holistic, that's going to meet not only their physical needs, but their physical and emotional needs as well as, and mental needs, as well as just the physical. You know, giving birth is so much more than just a physical act. There's a whole lot more going on, and the emotional aspect that the woman goes through that transition, through pregnancy, you know, dealing with so many things in pregnancy, and then when she's had the baby afterwards, there's a huge emotional transition that they make. And this focus seems to be very much on getting a live baby out, but not really on what the experience is like for the mother.
Yeah, I when I had Sophie 13 years ago, I didn't know what I know now. I didn't realise that it's almost like a rite of passage. And I kept hearing this phrase all the time: at least you've got a healthy baby. I wanted to smack them in the face. I'm like, no, I know I have a healthy baby. I'm not an idiot and I'm not a monster. I'm grateful for that. But why does that get to, you know, take away my experience and completely replace it? Well, I've just got a healthy baby. The process is so important. I was traumatized by my experience. And I afterwards I thought that can't be normal. Turns out it wasn't. But
you don't realize that at the time.
No, so many women don't. And, you know, rather than dealing with thousands and thousands of women who are traumatized, and I think the NHS really need to look at what they're doing and why women are turning to free birth when they're not actually confident to do it. You know, why they're not getting the support. And maybe instead of having all these guidelines ticked and reading out guidelines to women and saying, oh, you fit neatly or you don't, what about women-centered care? What about them making them feel like they're a person, an individual? You know, saying, oh, you've got a high BMI, so you can't have a home birth. Why? You know, why is that affecting me? I know you're talking about guidelines and the statistics, but what about me personally is suggesting that I'm going to end up having a bad time? You know, it's just
Yeah.
not on.
Yeah.
And that is why we've got an issue in the maternity system, because women aren't being heard. And more to the point, they don't even know they're allowed to be.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, I
scary
think,
thing.
yeah, I think the thing is that, you know, and I think it's all being unearthed, really, Nickita, is that, you know, generally as women, we have been silenced for thousands and thousands of years. And, you know, we've been conditioned to believe that, you know, what the doctor says is what's best for us. But actually, it's not necessarily the case, because we know ourselves better than anyone.
And it's
You know,
also a very new, it's a new way of birth, isn't it? A medicalization.
Yeah.
It's very new. Like, we've been
Yeah.
giving birth unassisted for millennia.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, with,
Yeah.
I suppose, you know, with
Yeah.
a wise woman at
Yeah.
birth, you
Yeah.
know, midwife,
Yeah.
doula. But it's a very new concept, having,
Yeah.
we're the
Yeah.
only species in the world that need help giving birth. What's that?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot of meddling. You know, if you leave it to their own devices, it will just unfold. But I think it's the lack of confidence and experience sometimes in healthcare professionals to just trust the process. Because when, like I said before, when you know it really well, it's really obvious when it's not going so well.
Yeah.
But of course, if you jump in every time, if you stress the mother, what that does is it stresses the baby. So it's no wonder that these babies then go in to have fetal distress, because you've stressed the mother.
But
they're so interconnected.
You get a lot of women thinking that they were an anomaly, and, oh, I just happened to have a really dangerous birth. And then you ask them questions, and it kind of unfolds that, well, your hormones weren't working correctly because you've got bright lights on you. You've walked into a place with strangers, people poking at you. You think your body's failed you. It hasn't. Your care's failed you. So they think, oh, actually, I was high risk, and I actually did need medical intervention because I was, you know, failure to progress. I hate that phrase. But it's not because that your body wasn't working. It's because of your bloody environment. And they don't realise that, you know, and I hear it a lot, oh, I'd rather give birth at hospital just in case something goes wrong. I'm like, well, the just in case is much more likely if you're going to be there. You know, I mean, that's not the point. I love home birth, and I'm a huge advocate for it, but it doesn't mean to say everyone should. You know, I'm all for informed consent. So if you have the information in front of you to make this decision and you still want to go to hospital, great, do it. That's exactly what you should do. But, you know, to be misguided and thinking that it's a safer option just because you've heard it and doctors are saying so, you know, maybe do a little bit more research in birth. And I think this all should start from school. You know, when children are doing sex ed at age 12, 13, if you understand birth physiology and how a woman's body works, maybe when you get, you know, grow up and you become pregnant, you're not going to sit there going, oh my God, this is so scary, I'm terrified. It'll be normal. But anyway, we're about done on time. Do you have anything else to add? Do you have any like advice that you want to give women who are pregnant currently?
Well, I think it's really important to do your reading, to be informed, because and to stick with what you decide. Sometimes things will go slightly off kilter, but in the vast majority, if you allow birth to just unfold, it will just unfold in the way that it's meant to. It's very rare, you know, it's a small number of women that actually need to have a cesarean. Many of the women who have cesareans is because there's been lots of intervention before. I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier when you said about the environment. It's the environment, and if you've got stressed healthcare professionals, that's going to have an impact on the mother as well. There's even been evidence to show that you can feel sort of energetically, you know, if there's fear in the room, you can feel it.
Of course, I didn't. That's why when Dottie was said to be breached, I didn't want the NHS midwives there. I thought, I don't want them and their energy, because they have no idea what to do in this scenario and they're not confident. I thought, I don't want this. This is going to stress me out. It's not conducive to the birth I want.
Yeah, and I think one of the things to say really is that, you know, in this day and age, I mean, I want to see it change in my lifetime. But in this day and age, if people sign up for a hospital birth, it often means a technological birth.
Yeah.
So to go into it thinking that you're going to have a really lovely, you know, water birth with, you know, low lighting and things, it's sort of unrealistic.
Yeah.
So it's about being realistic. It is more likely to be a technological birth.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that normal birth, straightforward birth doesn't happen in hospital at all. It's just the way things are now, that is often what people are signing up for, but they don't realise it.
Yeah, they need to understand the statistics. I mean, the second you step foot in hospital, it doesn't matter if you're going into their birth centre, it's the same staff.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah. And I think the thing about birth, you know, hospitals are for sick people.
Yeah.
But generally, pregnant women are not sick people. You know, they're going through a natural process. You know, we wouldn't be interfering so much in other physical aspects that they do, like, you know, going to the toilet. You know, we don't help them out to do that. So yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
no one goes, oh, it's time to have sex now. I'm just going to keep an eye just to make sure you can do it. You'll probably reach orgasm, but maybe not. So I'll just be here. So, you know, that's a good comparison. And sleep as well. No one helps you go to sleep. You don't think, oh, what do I have to do here? You just do it, right? It's a physiological process. Anyway, Alison, thank you so much for coming on to the YouTube channel today. It's been a pleasure having you. And let's do it again in a few months and see what's going on when push comes to shove, see if there's any difference. We might be talking about something totally different. So thank you so much.
I love to think so. Thanks, Nickita. Bye.